You set a mousetrap in your kitchen last winter. You baited it, placed it against the wall, and walked away. You didn't have to watch it. You didn't have to chase anything. Somewhere while you slept, the trap did the hunting for you. That feels like a small, modern convenience. But the real answer to where that idea came from is far stranger and far older than anything happening in your kitchen. Because a trap isn't really a tool. Not in the way a spear is a tool, or a knife, or a hammer. Those objects extend your arm. A trap extends your mind into the future. It requires you to imagine an animal that isn't there yet, predict exactly how it will move through a landscape it hasn't entered yet, and build a device that will still be lethal long after you've walked away and stopped paying attention. No other predator on Earth does this. Not one. And that gap between you and every other hunting animal on the planet is where this story actually begins. Start with the world before traps existed at all. For most of early human history, hunting meant confrontation. You saw the animal. You threw the spear, or you chased it, or you cornered it with a group. Success depended on your strength, your speed, your aim, right there in the moment. That's how every predator on Earth still hunts today. A lion doesn't plan 3 days in advance. A wolf pack doesn't imagine a gazelle that hasn't been born. Their intelligence, and it is real intelligence, is built entirely around the present tense. React, chase, kill, eat. What changed for early humans wasn't strength. Humans were never the strongest animal in any ecosystem they lived in. What changed was something happening quietly inside the skull, and it would eventually rewrite the entire relationship between humans and every other species on the planet. That shift has a name among cognitive scientists. It's called mental time travel. The ability to imagine a future that doesn't exist yet, and act on it now, even though nothing about the present moment demands it. Most animals live almost entirely inside the now. A squirrel burying nuts for winter looks like planning, but it's mostly instinct, wired in by evolution rather than reasoned out in the moment. What early humans developed was different. It was flexible. It let you look at a riverbank, imagine an animal walking across it 2 days from now, and build something today that would still be waiting when that future finally arrived. That single mental trick is the entire seed of the trap. Everything else, the ropes, the pits, the triggers, is just engineering built on top of a thought experiment your ancestors were having inside their own heads. So what did the first traps actually look like? Archaeologists have found evidence of deadfall traps dating back tens of thousands of years. Simple in concept, but genuinely clever in execution. A heavy rock or log propped up at an angle by a carefully balanced stick. Bait placed just beneath it. An animal disturbs the stick reaching for the food, and the weight above collapses down in an instant. No human needs to be present. No human needs to be strong enough to overpower the animal directly. The trap does the killing, using gravity as the weapon, and patience as the strategy. Think about what that actually demands cognitively. You have to understand weight and balance well enough to build a mechanism that fails on command. You have to understand animal behavior well enough to know exactly what will pull that trigger stick. And you have to be willing to walk away, leaving your success entirely in the hands of a device with zero guarantee it will work. That's not brute force. That's an early form of engineering powered by imagination rather than muscle. Snares tell an even stranger part of the story, because they required a second invention layered on top of the first: rope. Twisting plant fibers or sinew into cordage strong enough to hold, then looping that cordage into a noose rigged to tighten the instant something pulled against it. Some snares were staked to the ground, waiting silently for a rabbit or a bird to step through the loop. Others were far more ambitious, rigged to a bent sapling under tension, so that when an animal triggered the mechanism, the tree itself would snap upright and yank the prey straight off the ground into the air. Picture the amount of forward planning packed into that single design. You had to bend a young tree days or even weeks in advance. You had to understand that stored tension in wood behaves almost like a coiled spring, centuries before anyone had a word for physics. And you had to trust that tension to still be there, patiently waiting, long after you'd walked away to hunt somewhere else entirely. Is that so different from setting a trap of your own today, than walking away and simply trusting it to work? Then there were pit traps, and these reveal something else about the humans who dug them. Coordination on a scale that went far beyond a single hunter working alone. Digging a pit deep enough to trap a large animal, then disguising the opening with branches and leaves so the ground looked untouched, wasn't a job for one person working quietly by themselves. It required a group. It required a shared plan, discussed, and agreed upon before a single shovel of dirt was moved. Some cultures used pit traps to funnel entire herds toward cliffs, an early form of what modern researchers now call landscape-scale hunting, where the trap wasn't a single object at all, but an entire manipulated environment. Fences built from stone, paths deliberately narrowed by piling brush along the edges, herds funneled for miles toward a single fatal drop, sometimes over the course of days. That's not a tool anymore. That's infrastructure. And it's worth sitting with what that really means. Long before writing, before permanent cities, before anything resembling formal architecture, humans were already thinking in terms of systems, engineering entire stretches of land to bend an animal's future behavior to their will. Now here's the counterintuitive twist buried inside all of this, the part that actually reframes the entire story. You'd assume that spears and clubs, the direct, in-your-face weapons, came first, and traps were just a lazier shortcut invented later once someone got tired of the danger. But cognitive archaeologists argue the opposite might be closer to the truth, at least in terms of raw mental demand. A spear requires physical skill and split-second reaction. Real, but immediate. A trap requires modeling an entire future scenario inside your head, then trusting a passive object to execute a plan hours or days after you've already left the scene. That's a fundamentally different kind of intelligence. It's the same mental architecture underneath delayed gratification, underneath saving food for a harsher season instead of eating it all today, underneath the very first agricultural experiments, where humans buried seeds in the ground and simply trusted a future they couldn't yet see. Some researchers now believe trap making might be one of the earliest hard pieces of evidence for genuinely modern human cognition, arguably even more revealing than the weapons found lying right beside it in the same ancient soil. Doesn't it feel strange that the humble mousetrap under your sink might share a direct cognitive lineage with the human ability to plan an entire harvest season? And the traps kept getting sharper, quite literally, as that kind of thinking compounded across thousands of generations. Fish weirs appeared, elaborate funnel-shaped fences built directly into rivers and tidal flats, engineered to let fish swim in easily on the incoming current, then trap them helplessly as the water receded back out. Some of these structures, found off the coasts of Wales and in tidal shallows in Australia, are thousands of years old and still visible in satellite images today, stone lines curving quietly beneath shallow water. Bird traps grew increasingly specialized too, some using nets triggered by a hidden human hand, others relying purely on the pull of gravity and a well-placed weight, tuned to whatever species happened to be the local staple. Every single refinement represents the same idea, repeated and sharpened across an almost incomprehensible span of time. Watch the animal, understand its habits with real precision, predict its future movement. Build something today that exploits that pattern tomorrow, all without needing to be physically present when the moment of truth finally arrives. Here's where the story quietly turns, and starts pointing straight back at you because this pattern of thinking never actually went away. It just changed shape and moved indoors. Every trap you've ever encountered as a modern person runs on the exact same underlying logic your ancestors were using around a fire tens of thousands of years ago. A mousetrap baited with peanut butter is a deadfall trap, just built from steel instead of stone. A fishing lure is a snare, dressed up to look tempting rather than threatening. And the traps aren't only physical anymore, are they? A social media app engineered to autoplay the next video before you've even had a chance to decide whether you actually want to keep watching is built on precisely the same cognitive foundation as that ancient pit, camouflaged with branches so the ground looks completely untouched. Someone studied your behavior, someone predicted your future movement through their product with real precision, and someone built something today specifically designed to catch you tomorrow without needing to be standing there in the room watching when it actually happens. That's not a metaphor stretched too far to make a neat point. It's the same mental architecture, running in a straight, unbroken line from a deadfall trap balanced on a stick in the Ice Age, all the way to a phone notification engineered to pull your thumb toward a screen at exactly the moment you're most likely to click it. The tools changed almost beyond recognition. Wood turned into steel, then into code, then into an algorithm running quietly on a server somewhere you will genuinely never see. But the underlying skill, modeling a future mind, predicting its exact movements, and building something patient enough to wait for it, has stayed essentially identical since the very first human bent a sapling toward the sky and walked away, trusting it to still be there when the moment finally came. So the next time you set a trap of your own, whether it's a literal one in your kitchen for an actual mouse, or something smaller and quieter, like a calendar reminder built to catch your future self at exactly the right moment, remember what that instinct actually is. It isn't laziness. It isn't some shortcut around real hunting. It's one of the oldest, most distinctly human forms of intelligence there is, the ability to reach forward into a future you cannot see yet, and leave something patient enough behind to wait for it. You didn't have to watch that mousetrap in your kitchen last winter. You already knew, deep in a part of your mind far older than language itself, exactly how to make the future do the waiting for you.